Go fingers. But yeah. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Barbican exhibition Echoes of Identity by Art.Africa. And yeah, come see the show. So we start off with this part of the show. Amazing artist, Xavier Leopold. One of he's got like one of his sculptures and one of his painting walks. Actually, no, paintings in the show. So these kind of the starts of the exhibition. I have two metal walk sculptures, both of them kind of telling different tales in relation to identity. We wouldn't go into the long philosophical idea around it, but just the texture in terms of like I wanted to start heavy with some metal sculptures, which then leads into different kind of mediums through the exhibition as well. One of my favorites as well in the show. I really like the sculptures. I was very particular about trying to get these sculptures for him to put in the show. I believe they even sold, so he managed to reach out to his collectors to actually give us the show in the show, which is actually quite exciting.
How did you come up with the name of it, as we're at the start, and Echoes of Identity?
Okay, Echoes of Identity, a contemporary narrative. So the full title, I know we've all been calling it Echoes of Identity, but the full title is Echoes of Identity, a contemporary narrative. And it came about as a way of like having conversation around quote unquote kind of identity, but in this new formed space where we're allowed to kind of choose from where we're coming from, choose from what's around us to create what we're going to have in the future. That's both in culture, identity, and in terms of like position as an artist and where you feel your ideologies lie, so to speak. A lot of it is informed by how you grew up and where you've kind of like attached yourself identity-wise, while there are these new things that situation, maybe position, maybe timing has allowed you to be in a different space and you don't completely abandon everything you've kind of had before then. Not at the same time do you just completely consume everything you come across. So there's that clash in between, and it's almost like a creation of a third space. And with the exhibition, I was trying to have everybody kind of like explore that. So I picked different artists' work purely based on some of those conversations around in diaspora, conversations around new identity, conversations around culture and Black Britishness, if that makes sense.
You answered my second question, which is going to be, how did you choose the artist in the show?
Oh yeah. So yeah, that was actually how a lot of the artists were selected. I mean, most of the artists I've known personally, and I've had in the back of my head that once I get a chance, I want to do something with them. I think that's the beauty about being an artist as well as a curator. You get to be around, not just from a position of, oh, yeah, here's a show, can I come and visit you? Like almost your everyday still involves different artists and like talking to them, challenging them, your ideas. And so when it comes to it, sometimes you have an advantage regarding like knowing what works are available, and you can specifically ask for, oh, do you have like, similar to what I did with you, whereas like I specifically asked, can I get this one, or what do you have available? I think those are kind of the beauties of it, I guess. You get to.
We actually bumped into each other a few months ago and had a great conversation on the train.
Yeah, that was my vibes. And still, there's still even like from that conversation, I definitely, even a series that will come much later, explore how kind of the relationship between street food and newspaper. So it's something that I'm going to explore a lot, because it's almost like that conversation of today's news is tomorrow's fish and chips paper. But it also applies to outside in different parts of the world where it's like Akara.
In Nigeria,
exactly.
they reuse
popcorn.
paper,
Yeah, literally.
bottles,
Yeah,
packaging.
exactly.
So there's a circularity there.
Yeah.
That happens with food as well, and then also
Exactly, with the packaging. Yeah, so is that unity, if that makes sense. But that's it's another day. So this is my work. Yes, okay, yes. So with my work, I've got different, kind of like a three-part conversation of the same thing, but just at different times. So start off with the sculpture itself. This is part of like one of my main parts of my practice, where I'm using accessible materials and sort of everyday objects like tape and newspaper, and just like what we call art povera, so pour art, to kind of create these images and sort of make these sculptures. With the show itself, this was the last part of what I added to it, because I had somewhat of a old sculpture that I kind of rearranged and reconstructed, and then it looked a certain way and I didn't want it, so I made a new sculpture completely. So it was the very last part of the show.
So as you're using newspaper in these
Yeah.
sculptures, how easy is it for you to just, if you start something and
Yeah.
you're like, not loving this,
Yeah.
you're just going to scrap it and start?
Absolutely. So I think when I started doing art initially, in my head I had like hidden competitions with people. And so for me, my competition with fellow artists, I always thought to myself, oh, it's quicker for me to create a full-blown artwork than you are. If that makes sense, because if you take pictures, you're gonna have to go and print it. If you paint it, you need to wait for the paint to dry. If you drew, you need more time to. While with this, I can literally fold while I was talking to you, and in about an hour, I can have a full-blown human statue. And I like the idea that you didn't have to double down regarding, like. It's funny because it's actually just a stack of newspaper with tape around it. But because of the form it's taking, it gives it emotion and it makes people feel like, oh my God, is this okay? And it's fragile because of the material, but it's not fragile because of the material, which means if it breaks, I'll cut, so it's just a bit more paper and tape around it. So it's a very kind of interesting medium in that sense. And then you also have the people that are so amazed because it's something that was like this and paper. But then you also have the question of like, oh, how do you sustain it? Which brings about the conversation of, should all art be sustainable? Should all art be sustainable in a kind of factual format of like, this thing can last this long versus the ability to keep on creating sustainable. And so I think it opens different conversations to me every time. And in a way, you actually see little different versions of references of how that newspaper will transform once we go through the walk. So, I mean, because I'm here, I'll tell you a little bit more about my walk, but I'll try not to spend too much time. I'll start with that one because these are light topic, and then we'll go to this one, which is probably the one that has most conversation. This is a painting from 2 years ago. 2 years ago for my show last year as part of Great News. It was a painting just talking about United Blackness and identity in that sense. So the idea that in Nigeria or in Africa would be from different cultures and different tribes with different geographical locations, which would be amplified and romanticized to the point where these people believe that they're so different from each other. While you come to places like London, the idea of United Blackness exists in terms of like someone Ethiopian, somehow, some way is the same culture as you, or someone Jamaican is very much the same as you, and you actually interlock, and sometimes you go to carnival feeling like it's very much yours, and you will have conversation around those that want to cancel it. You would scream cultural appropriation for something Ghanaian, even though you're Nigerian, where in reality, if you're in Nigeria and Ghana, you're so far apart, and people still identifying their differences that it doesn't allow you guys to just be one. I mean, we're both Nigerians, so we see it every day with people go, oh no, this part there, this part, and they somehow convince themselves that they're extremely different, that they can't even coexist in the same land. And then you come here, it's like something happening in America to African Americans, and we feel some sort of way about it. And I think there's something beautiful about that, even though we skip it all the time. But that's kind of what the painting was. A little reference, the smoke in the air is kind of reference to I'm on smoke, or I got smoke for you, which is something not necessarily positive. And then you got the Marcus Garvey in the background. And then you got the British flag, obviously, kind of exploring that, and the attires, because I'm Nigerian, House of Fulani, basically. I'll show you this one quickly. It's a similar topic, but actually, I wouldn't spend too much time on this.
Side-by-side comparison of who's in the painting. Yeah, okay, continue.
And also, very rarely do I do self-portraits, if you notice, with my work. I barely paint people that are real anyway. So this was...
Every artist should do at least one self-portrait.
Yeah.
Photography.
Yeah. Every now and then I think I have a few, but every now and then, every time I kind of develop my painting skills or change in style, I do another one just as a kind of a diary. And maybe you can do an exhibition with just self-portraits sometime down in the line, bro. And with this one, you get to see like the manipulation and development of that newspaper idea. In sort of a canvas format. So that's a canvas painted, but it's painted to look like a newspaper. It's not hyper-realist, however, the idea was to make it close enough to what you can so that it sits in sort of like a 3D format in front of the painting that continues the folded newspaper. And then of course I've got little references. The black man white mask is reference to black skin, white mask in Fana. Yeah. one of the conversations around the exhibition is actually talking about that, the fact that you can't exist outside because of what colonization has done. You almost exist against the stereotype or exist within the stereotype, and it's almost like you're not allowed to be.
I feel like that's another conversation about how black artists art is always being talked about through the lens of identity.
Yeah.
And not enough attention is given to the actual like
Art
look
itself.
At this, the object that's being made,
Yeah.
newspaper that's like out of the frame.
Yeah.
You could get into some
Yeah.
other aspects.
Literally, yeah.
About it.
Yeah.
There's so much to say about the actual art.
Art, yeah.
That's outside of identity.
And I think a lot of us, it's almost like we're begging and fighting to be artists.
Yeah.
And then happen to be black,
Yeah.
as opposed to black artists. And it's why I say that it's funny, because I feel like all I care about talking about are these issues. However, I don't want to be boxed into this idea. So a part of me sometimes is holding some accountability at the idea that, yes, I don't want to be a black artist, yet most of my paintings happen to reference my thing. So exactly, we have to show ourselves. Exactly.
Part of the struggle is how are we going to articulate what we're doing whilst making sure we're, giving credence to what's come before, but also saying this is about the now.
Absolutely, and the art, like everybody else. Yeah, like everybody else, like gets to be a landscape artist. Us as an African artist, people get to be photographers. Oh, the African photographer. Like the idea, it's almost like for me, actually, the way I look at it is if we can abandon the label and retain the heritage, then we're in a perfect balance. And that's not just something we can do by ourselves. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But yeah. And by the way, this painting is pretty much about what we just talked about. Like, actually, I should have come here while we were doing those conversations, but it's actually directly talking about that reference of like being a black artist. The idea of the sculpture itself has come to represent me, that newspaper sculpture. And if you look around it, it's got like these metal chains around, and it's got these metal chains around it where you can kind of see that it's unraveling itself from the metal chain, but also that metal chain is what's keeping the tires up, in a sense. So it's a direct metaphor to the idea that we've romanticized black struggle and anything that has to do with slavery. Those seems to be the arts that gets the light, or that, when you're like, oh yeah, now because we came from this and we're going from that, those things will win Oscars, those things will get the green light to go ahead, and while other narratives are still struggling to find its way. So it's like that conversation. And then I've kind of expanded it through like the tire and play to ready-made objects. There's a lot of references in the writing, but the box under also represents that being put into the box and like trying to break out of a box. So the tire and all of that is what's holding him up, but there's a level of fragility. So that's why we've got the fragile tapes on it, that by just creating 2 or 3 walks talking about the same topic, I can immediately put myself back into that box of identity as well. All the things in the bottom are representations of things that we consider African to a large extent, but also didn't originate in Africa. But then the question is, because it didn't originate in Africa, does it make it not African? And also the question is, because like if people eat this, they drink this, and this is predominantly the drink, and you only find it in this area, is it of that area? And also, if people wear this and you only see them wearing this, or they primarily champion, can you call it theirs, or why can't you call it theirs? And the same thing with India. This one is by Charlie Mensah. Charlie Mensah did a whole series called Gifted Child, I believe. There's more context into it. And this is a 6-part, is a bigger series. It's actually a short film, but he's got images from the short film. And these are all different people that they've kind of formed a community over here in London. But they're all kind of like, I guess the story is people that their parents had migrated to France. And then from France, them themselves have migrated over to London. So it's almost like going through the same experience that their parents went through from whichever African country to France, and them doing that now in this day and age in London. And they're all different creatives and different people with different, I think it's quite a very interesting like mini doc short film if you ever get to watch it. He's doing his thing. I really like what he does. But yeah, I had to have Charlie here as well. It came give it a balance, especially in this part of the show where there's like a lot of colors as such. This kind of balances it out. And this is by an artist, Samson. Samson's work kind of explores mythology. And I guess he was trying to draw parallels between like ancient Yoruba mythologies and Greek mythologies in some sense. I think most people don't realize the timeline and how much the Yoruba one you can argue it predates what we kind of understand as Greek mythology. And gods like Thor, if you look at the attributes they have, would be the exact as Shango. In terms of like what they did and what their powers were and what position they held, thanking God of Thunder, all of that stuff. And it's quite interesting how one is almost put into movies and is celebrated, while the other is kind of put into this idea of myth and vilified and kind of voodoo and put in these kind of categories as if you say your deities, they're considered as witchcraft or whatever you want to call it, while the rest are given as children to children to play with and celebrate because they're quote unquote heroes in modern day time. But yeah, it's a part of that interesting conversation. I think this side of the room anyway is a lot of aspirational challenge and I guess myth. That's kind of how I've curated this part of the show, where you go in there, you get to this, and then you come here, and then moving from here, you go into kind of like internal self-reflections. A lot of the paintings on these sides have to do with like conversations around, I guess with these two, for example, Vanessa, she's kind of creating works where it's almost self-reflecting and like kind of challenging her ideas, how it feels to be there. I love the textures in there, and even when you start getting closer and you realize some of them are kind of out of canvas, while some of them are kind of flat into the canvas. That's cool. And then we have, which one would I do first? I'll do Johnmark actually, I'll do Johnmark. I think Johnmark's work is quite cool. Both of these are generally talking about movement as well, similar to Charles' work, but it's almost like making reference and conversation around how art has allowed him access to move around the world, or move even when he's not there. His art is able to move to these places and create kind of his space over there. So it's a conversation around, he's depicted it in like dancing and movement, but the idea of the conversation is really about being able to be in different places through, because he's from Nigeria, he's in Abuja as well. Both of his works actually just like talks about like the opportunity art has given him, the ability to move while still being here. Yeah, Emmanuel's probably the youngest artist in the show, actually. A lot of self-reflecting with his works as well. Not directly similar to him, but it's for the same reason I got both of them in the show, because they're both making conversation of growth and like how, I guess, art has allowed that growth or like that position to be able to explore. And remember, the theme is meant to be about identity. So I think what I wanted to do was like take people talking about identity from an introspective way, identity from how they see the world, identity and how it completely changes as time goes on, identity in terms of roots and still attaching like change to it. I think he would fall more on the space of like already knowing who you are, and then also open to not knowing who you are as you're going through the processes of learning. Yeah. And then this is a direct complementary walk to that. It's called Finding Your Balance. So that's also called Finding Your Balance, but this came first and then later grew into that. I guess the idea of it was a specific time trying to balance being an artist and different things going on in his life. He came up with the imagery. It was the perfect imagery, worked well when he went to RC and he was doing his MA sculpture. I think he was challenging ideas and reworking works that I think existed, and then somehow came up with this and then created this. There's multiple layers to it because you actually have to assemble it, which is quite cool.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, but I think one of the things I noticed, I heard him say, when he was talking about the walk roughly, was how clever it is where not unintentionally trying to talk about finding balance or whatever, it creates the Star of David from a top corner once you put the sculptures together.
I'm not going to get that, but...
Yeah, but it's like the image repeated and repeated and repeated. One of the reasons why I specifically wanted this is I think it has a lot of conversation, and maybe it wasn't even the intention regarding the artist yourself. However, for me, what I really took into it, I felt like it was making a kind of unintentionally or maybe intentionally making a direct reference to kind of what still life exists in terms of like both in art, contemporary photography, and its meaning when you compare like the Europeanized version of it and how they generally go for fruits or maybe put a dead fly there and just different things that was kind of their visual language of referencing what still life is. For me, especially in a show like this where I'm kind of like playing with different materials and artwork and whatever, I definitely wanted something that's, and for me at least, I think this is the standout, I guess, other. I think most people would randomly go to a show, and particularly, especially within the context of Black people, would used to have seen paintings, maybe seen photographies that have images. Yeah, that images of people that they could identify. So for me, it was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna try and get this, but also the position it holds for me, it was like, that conversation of like the multidimensional part of art so that we can all explore and enjoy, that's not stuck into what has been given to us as identity. And so I think that was what drew me to them initially. In terms of like the context of putting them in the show, my interpretation, or should I say, of the works became like the kind of, when you can see the peppers, you can see that it's like a bit more gingery, as you say in Nigeria. It's very ginger. It's the gingery stuff. So it's more gingery than the kind of classic European still lifes, where you almost can feel the vibe with the image. And I think that's true to be said about a lot of things, African or us or Black people, or like how they kind of appear. I think hand in hand, the bit of oomph that I guess the images carry itself, while still talking about still life, which is a whole nother genre that I was saying that people need to explore, allows more conversations. It also resonates with people that would have grown up with this kind of like food around them. And even the choice of like the ones that you chose, I think was really cool, because I've seen plantain and yam are both not just African, they're also very popular in like the Caribbean as well. So it was, hard food and like
in some South American.
South America, not some, in South America, yeah. So it's like, and also it's the same cultures of people with slightly different rations, or should I say, how they've been brought up or level of melanin, but really due to, if you follow house slavery and all of those patterns that spread all these people across the world, you still find these foods in these different places. And I thought it was a very interesting kind of conversation, again, to create that identity, similar to like the super malts or the Indomie box. Yeah, we get the last two artists, and this one I'm really excited for again. So the backstory is this walk, I actually had to do, what do you call it? Friend tax to get it in. I had to be like, I need you in the show, bro. And because Josh had just finished, congratulations to him, he had just finished at the time he was getting to the end of the show, Holborn Museum at Bath. He's solo, and I knew he was extremely tired, and he had done all work, and credit to him, and which we're happy for, he actually sold out the show and all of that stuff. So I knew that most of the work that was in the show wasn't coming. In fact, all the works that was in the show were already with collectors or just sold, so they weren't coming back. And I knew there wasn't that much work there because Josh is quite busy, but I was very happy when I was like, oh, do you have any work? So this is actually part of his personal collection. This work is also, oh, by the way, it's also an award-winning artwork. I believe it won a competition last year. Yes. I can't remember the one exactly. But yeah, it was a Moore gallery as well. Beautiful. And also, I don't know if you noticed, there are like these hidden images using transfer methods, in there. With this one, it's not that kind of pronounced, but if you're familiar with his work, you notice it. Like, so for example, you can see a tree there or a few trees there, and they're like all slightly different images. I think you kind of see them clearer when there's someone there.
Your eyes have to like adjust.
Yeah.
To see it.
Another really, really special artist. So a bit like you, I've been wanting to exhibit with Tonye for forever. And so I was really excited to actually manage to get this to happen in this show. I'm a big fan of Tonye's work. He does these things where it almost looks like a half-finished painting when he's done. So if you look here, so you can kind of see that, which I feel like kind of depicts that whole process of becoming more than is. And here he has it here, where it's like, or even the way these don't go all the way. It's almost like and the way he describes it is a lot of these images is using like the mask This is one of those that actually has a lot of depth to it that I don't want to kind of halfway talk about it, but what I'll do is he's using the mask to depict different images of people and kind of like talking about the fact that we're all wearing a mask to fit into society in a sense, in a way. Put it this way, growing up, suit and tie meant you're a serious guy. And it's like almost like redefining what that quote unquote serious guy look is by us. Yeah, a businessman, yeah. Yeah, exactly. But that's literally what I was about to say. Like, but like now using those new things that we've formed as Black British people, with heritage or whatever, and then Clint is very much Nigerian, very much British. Cortez itself is very much for the people in culture. So I feel like putting it in this position, and also very clever. I like the fact that the tracksuits are slagging as well. And putting it in this context as almost like saying, like, you could be yourself and still get to the highest spaces in art. And of course, this one as well. I really love the chest in this one.
Yes.
You see what I mean? He was like, yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I mean, just the whole, the mask, the way he uses it, the half finished and half done, it's quite clever too in terms of like, especially if you look at it from an outright, you might be like, oh, is he finished? And then you see little details like this and you realize that no, if he actually wanted to finish it, he would have finished it because of how extra detailed some of the other parts of the painting are. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the show. It was a quick walkthrough. I'm really happy about the show. We've got like little more displays, and what I've tried to do is put more context and details. A lot of this has been directly written by the artist, some tweaks and turns, so you get to hear it from the artist's point of view, exactly what they felt about their work or how they've put it together. And for me, I've just arranged this how the show walks through, so you can have a nice little walkthrough, see the images, get to know, learn about the artist a little bit more. I'm grateful for all the artists that was taking part in it. Art.Africa as well for getting the opportunity. The Barbican Library have been very generous in terms of like allowing us to adjust, come this way, move this way. So that's been really cool. It ends on the 28th, Wednesday. Open every day apart from Sunday. So if you're still here, come check it out. If not, you missed out on it. I mean, you feel me?
All right.